Welcome to Hashtime with Nakabuye. This is a place where we help you unravel social constructs, discuss self-development in line with mental health, emotional well-being, and everything in between that directly or indirectly affects us in the millennial world around us. If you're hearing my voice for the first time and are the kind of person who is not scared of being a better version of yourself even if it requires you to contradict who you were 24 hours ago, consider this your virtual home. I'm your host, Nakabuye, and I cannot wait to engage with you in the various conversations. Lorna, how are you doing?
I am good. How are you? I'm so happy to be back, as always.
But you're always going to be here. You're always going to be here. We shouldn't give them the announcement before we make it official. But let them be patient.
I know, like... we need to have them like miss me a bit.
I guess,
but it's always fun, and I'm always excited.
I guess that does not need any introduction. So, Lorna, welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be back.
Yeah. So here we are in June. We've come to the middle of the month. What much can we say about it?
Middle of the month, girl. It's the beginning.
Middle of the year. I meant year. See, I'm already tired, man.
Okay. Well, at least maybe we have an idea of how your year is going.
What has 2023 been like for you so far?
The first bit was a bit slow. Just picking up from 2022 and just getting back into, environment, getting used to things. It was a bit slow. Work-wise, socially, whatever, in all aspects was very slow. But I'm picking it now. I'm looking up to new opportunities at least, so it's looking up. I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
At least by the end of the year, I'll probably be in a good place.
So we have June, and last month we celebrated. We commemorated the Mental Health Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. And now here we are in June, and we have to be talking about post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah.
I love this topic, by the way.
You do?
I do. You know why? Because it's a very complex diagnosis.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very complex, and also with the complexity, it brings a lot of like, what's the word should I use? Like a lot of mystery, I guess. Mystery, and then with mystery, it gives opportunity for it to be very misunderstood, and maybe used in places that it's technically maybe not supposed to be used. And I know people use it a lot, like, oh my God, I have like PTSD from this. And it's like, I wish you understood how complex this is. Yeah. I don't think you'd be throwing it around that easily. So I love that we're talking about this and just educating people about this topic. So I'm actually very excited.
Last week, let me see, was it last week? Today is Monday, yes. Oh dear. Yes, last week. I had to be sure. So don't do that. I really need to reflect and be like, what happened yesterday? Yeah, yesterday was Sunday. So today is Monday. And last week, I asked a friend how he was doing. And he sent me a message. Let me see it. I'm terrible with passive. Was it called passive language? I always have to... Usually when I'm telling someone a story about a chat, I carry the whole phone. Like, please see for yourself.
Oh, wow. You can't just put it in like summary.
No. I feel like I'm missing out the juice. So last week, a friend asked me how I was doing. And when I asked him how he was doing, he was like, I'm okay. Just caught PTSD. So I really understood where he was coming from because, we have been lawyering in Uganda. So when he said caught PTSD, of course, I wanted to push back and be like, hey, don't just do that. But I also, at least someone has a slight awareness of what it is, much as they don't have a full awareness of it. So I guess it's time for us to dive into it and have an understanding.
Yes, and I hope this reaches so many people because I've been seeing it a lot on social media and everywhere, and even people saying it, and I'm just like cringing, like, oh my god. So I hope this gets to the masses, and awareness. Anyway, that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah. So I think it's better for us to start with a definition. What is PTSD?
Yeah. So PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. In the DSM-5, it is under, DSM-5 is the book that we, therapists and psychiatrists use to make diagnosis. So it is under the trauma and stress-related disorders. This is one of the complex, diagnoses that are there. Typically, someone to be diagnosed with PTSD would have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, both children and adults. And by traumatic event, I mean like a major accident that maybe caused the death of, anyone in particular, or like being in war, or any type of like abuse. So be it like you are the victim of abuse or a victim of war, a victim of a survivor of war, survivor of like a major accident or like a big natural disaster, anything traumatic, really. So you either witnessed it or you like in it, you were in it, like you are, survivor or a victim.
Yeah.
So that is the traumatic event. So for people to be diagnosed with it, they have to have you experience an event, or you witness, or you're in the event, and then afterwards it takes about for children, with anyone 6 years and younger, they can be diagnosed with PTSD, and even adults. So it has to take a certain time. You have to be experiencing symptoms for a period of about 6 months. Symptoms in relation or in response to the traumatic event.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the time where we're going to like particular symptoms.
Exactly, because I was going to be asking, when you're talking about the symptoms, what symptoms are we looking at?
So these symptoms are grouped in 4 categories. So, and this is both for children and adults. So one of the categories is intrusion. So are we having intrusive memories, flashbacks, nightmares related to the traumatic event? Nightmares are very common with children because sometimes they are not able to, let's say, use their words, explain. So usually it happens in like their dreams. So they get nightmares and a child is waking up or having trouble sleeping, stuff like that. The second category is avoidance. So avoiding any reminders of the event, people, places, activities, conversations associated with the trauma. Like someone avoiding a place where they had a particular accident, or someone avoiding men because of, they were abused as children by a particular man, or someone avoiding, I know we've talked about this in the past where you said when you experience, I can't remember if it was the bombing or something, when you try to stay away from the go-go.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was the...
Yes, I think we've talked about it twice on the podcast. Must have been, I'm not so sure, but yes, I did bring it up. And for those that have not been chanced to listen in to all the episodes on which you've been featured, we are still asking you to go back to the genesis. You don't just start from the middle. Yes, I talked about Lugogo, and what happened with Lugogo is that I lost a cousin who was bombed in the Al-Shabaab Kampala bombings. And I was at school, of course, but the news shattered the nation. And to hear, I don't know if it was the time when mom came on VD, but I don't think she gave me the details because they were avoiding they didn't want to tell me, I think. But I found out from the newspapers. And So what happened, I didn't know much about Lugogo, but when I joined the university and I got to know what Lugogo is or where it is, I always panicked every time we were in a taxi going past Lugogo.
Right.
I would be like, we need to leave this place very fast. I don't know where.
Like right now?
Yeah, we need to leave it right now. I didn't like it when the traffic lights stopped us there. I didn't like finding jam there. Because I would start staring in the place, asking myself, so she really couldn't jump over this fence. This fence is very short. Where was she seated and all those things? But I think when I think so much into it, I also feel like because of that, I started avoiding crowds. I always want to be in a place where I can easily exit.
Escape, yeah.
Yes. I don't know what it was like, but I know there were very many people. But I just do not want to be in a position where I cannot save myself. So I can't be in crowds. When I see some of these videos or pictures of revelers at concerts, sometimes I'm like, yeah, you guys are risk takers. You you can't run. How do you place yourself in that position? Yeah, they're having fun. Sometimes I'm also enjoying while I'm seeing them on behind the screen, of course. But those thoughts keep coming like, yo, this is risky. I mean, if a bomb happens, I'm always having that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't have the full details of what it looks like, of what it looked like at that time, but I know I'm carrying this with myself.
Right. And here's the thing. Now that you said that, like you don't know what it looked like, you weren't there, but you were told a story. And now you actually probably maybe, you added some details to that story because of your imagination.
Yeah,
and
I mean, she was buried without a head. So it's...
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is one way, like this is one of the other things of like how someone can get diagnosed with PTSD, the exposure to the actual or the threatened, event. You did not witness it. I mean, yeah, you weren't there, but you learned of it.
Yeah.
They told you story, you learned of it. This could also be, you could easily be, diagnosed. Someone can easily get PTSD from learning of that traumatic event, especially if it was a close family member.
Yeah.
Or like a friend that it happened to, and also people that experience extreme exposure to, aversive details of like traumatic events, like policemen, first responders, where they have to always, come to a crime, collect and see all these things every now and then. So even these people can get PTSD. Mm-hmm. So, those other ways people can actually, pick up on trauma and stuff like that. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
When I have a specialist on set, I always become the patient. I just
free therapy.
I end up, because you want to have a clearer image. When I have guests, it's me probing and bringing out these things. And when I have a specialist, I find myself, I am the one.
Like, here we go. Let it all out.
Yeah, because we can't. Yeah. I think in the beginning I wanted to have it just specialists, professionals. But then I realized that it wouldn't paint a clearer image for the usual person. They would be like, of course they studied that. But when you personify something, at least there is a relation and people have a clearer understanding. So
exactly, which is good. And I was just going to say that actually. That's
the price I have to pay.
I'm sure they appreciate it. So we got you. Anyway, look, we're talking about the 4 categories. So we talked about intrusion, the memories, flashbacks, etc., and then avoidance. The third one is like negative alterations in cognition and mood.
What is that?
Where someone is sometimes someone is unable to remember important aspects of the trauma. It could be like amnesia, like maybe a head injury, or if like alcohol or drugs were involved while the person, experienced or was whatever the case may be. Sometimes they're not able to remember. Some could also be to dissociative amnesia, where they and we can go deeper into this. Dissociation, where someone separates themselves from the trauma. Yeah. And this is what typically this comes about when the trauma is so like heavy, intense, and someone just, the body and mind try to create a whole different picture. Like they separate, like the person separates themselves from the trauma, just one way to cope with the trauma. And we can go deeper into that later on. And, or other ways of negative alterations could also be a persistent or like exaggerated negative belief, or like thinking everything is dangerous. So someone who, let's say, experienced sexual abuse when they were children, or even when they're adults, they could pick up the negative belief of all men are dangerous.
Right.
I am a bad person. No one can be trusted. I'm ruined. Like I'll never be good enough. Stuff like that. So it alters the way someone thinks, and then eventually it affects their mood. So this is where depression comes in. This is where anxiety comes in. A lot of other personality disorders may come in as a result also. It could also lead to like an altered cognition in the sense of someone may start blaming themselves for what happened.
Right.
This is when you start hearing someone is like, oh, maybe if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't have been abused. If I had just driven faster, I could have avoided that accident. They take on the self-blame and they carry it with them.
Yeah.
People get fearful, they get angry, they feel guilt, they feel ashamed, or like they just lose interest in, in significant activities. So let's say someone that loved, like race car driving or whatever it is, and then the trauma was in that particular activity, they might stay away from that.
You've mentioned that part of blaming oneself, and what came to mind was children mostly. It happens for adults, but then you're looking at something someone grows with, because there is a family that I saw dissolving, and by dissolving I mean the partners had to go separate ways, and I think the middle child was always crying and telling the mom to tell the dad to forgive her, feeling like she's the problem, and that's why the dad had to leave.
Yeah.
And I think
that happens a lot, actually.
Exactly. And the oldest child, I think at one point found the dad strangling the mom.
Oh, that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to hear.
Had we finished with the categories? I think we had gotten to the third. Probably we'll talk about that part when we get to the children.
Yeah, no problem. And the fourth category is an alteration in arousal. So by arousal, I'm meaning like anger, outburst, hypervigilance of like, let's say when you're in a particular situation, let's say, okay, in the case of like abuse.
Yeah.
And like sexual abuse. So this person, if they come to, they get in a place where they're in the same space as someone who looks similar to their abuser, they'll get hypervigilant. They're always looking out for signals, or like if someone, touches their ear, and maybe they're going to they raise their hand, they're going to slap me like my abuser slapped me.
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to think of other examples. Or someone who experienced war, every time they hear like fireworks, or they're always going to be like on alert,
Yeah.
So they're always on alert or like on edge. So they have trouble like concentrating, or like an exaggerated stutter response. Like let's say you are in a war situation, and it's New Year's Day, you hear like fireworks. People do get excited, but someone who has PTSD, their response will be a lot bigger. Like they'll find themselves in a corner, like hands on their ears, or like get really really scared. Or someone like, let's say a child, if they're like they've been going through some type of like physical abuse or emotional abuse. When they hear someone raise their voice, they're going to be like shaken up, maybe like even frozen, and you're just like, well, that didn't call for that type of reaction, but it's because of, their symptoms that everything just goes back to, okay, I'm about to be, taken back to this traumatic event.
Yeah.
So they are always like ready to go, trouble sleeping, falling asleep or staying asleep, restless sleep. So those could also be, alterations in arousal or like reactivity associated with a traumatic event. And then the last category, I said 4, but it's 5. The last one is duration of the disturbance. So if it's more than 1 month of experiencing symptoms in these categories, you have to have a symptom, one or two, in each of the categories to be diagnosed with PTSD. So that's what I was saying in the beginning, like people that just throw this thing out there, make it like very light, make it seem like it's a very light thing, but really it's intense. You have to have filled all these particular things to, I guess I'll use the word quote unquote qualify to be diagnosed with PTSD.
Yeah.
So yeah. I hope this makes sense.
I know you've touched a bit on symptoms, but are there specific ways that you would want to break down how PTSD may affect someone's daily life and even relationships?
Yeah. Let's see. We could start with children, I guess. Like how it affects children. But we could talk about like how it manifests in children, how it shows up, and how that could also be very that affects on have an effect on their lives. So one thing, especially with children, they will show signs different. Of course, they'll show signs differently from the adults because children are children. One of them will be reenactment. Reenactment is like repeating the behavior during like playtime or like in drawings, or they'll say things. I've had lots of stories. Especially that's why with like children, it's play therapy is very key. Because sometimes they don't know that word to use. So but when you give them stuff to play with, you could give them like dolls or trains or whatever they like to play with. And then one way or another, they will reenact what happened to them. And that's their way of communicating. You're someone who maybe was abused physically or emotionally, like you'll find a child like maybe raising their voice at a particular doll, saying something, or like maybe fighting a particular, one doll fighting the other, or like trains crashing, or like you find them drawing. They'll find a way of communicating. They'll draw like a picture. With children, the biggest sign where PTSD will manifest is reenactment. So that's why it's very important with children, especially those that can't, 6 or under, play therapy or drawings. Like they will eventually show exactly what happened to them. And then the second one is nightmares. If they're having frequent nightmares, without, it could have some content related to the trauma, or sometimes it doesn't. So it's very tricky for children. But either way, they will have the nightmares. And then it could also be some separation anxiety.
Yeah.
Where they don't want to be separated from their caregivers, or like someone that they feel safe with. They feel, there might be some separation anxiety. And this, again with children, when it's a new behavior, it's something to pay attention to. Yeah. So if this is someone that was comfortable with you living to go to work or whatever, and now all of a sudden they don't want to leave your side. They're just like, super clingy, and they're just, if maybe they start crying, or especially if you leave them in company with someone, maybe their abuser. Because you might not know,
Yeah.
in most cases. So, yeah, it's very likely that they will show some type of separation anxiety when you're leaving them behind. Let's say, another one is regression. So let's say someone out of the blue, like a child, they used to wet their bed before, but now, they stopped. It's been a few years or months, whatever, of not bedwetting, and then all of a sudden they start bedwetting again. Or they're like sucking their thumb again, or they're getting clingy again. That could be a sign. Avoidance also shows up with them. Avoidance of activities, places. You will know, like if the child used to love a particular household, friends or whatever, like maybe they love a particular activity and now all of a sudden they don't want it anymore. It could be nothing. Maybe they've just outgrown that activity. However, just again, pay attention to any sign, like all these signs. It could be that they experience something there they just want to avoid, and they just don't know how to communicate that with, the caregiver. It could also be some alterations in cognition for, like, if they're feeling sadness, confusion, any type of fear, if they're getting socially withdrawn, if this was like an active child, friendly, whatever, now all of a sudden they're withdrawn.
Yeah.
That could also be one of the things. The diminished interest in particular activities, trouble sleeping, hypervigilance, and this is where it gets a little bit similar to the adult. Trouble sleeping, the exaggerated stutter response where, there's a loud bang and then the kid is just like, it reacts in a way that is over exaggerated. It's a bit like much. And you're like, what's going on? Again, also, if the disturbance is more than 1 month, that could qualify for PTSD diagnosis. Difficulty with school, learning, social interaction, concentration, same thing. So, and this is how it affects them. Like they have difficulty, they could have trouble sleeping, the regression, bedwetting, separation anxiety, so stuff like that. Any different mood, like constantly sad, constantly shame, feeling like shame, or because when children are ashamed, like they will kind of like withdraw, look down, and then it's just like what's going on. So those are also things to think about because it affects them, socially, school and all that stuff. Then with adults, similar things, it impairs their relationship.
By relationship, what do you mean?
I mean, it could be like intimate relationships and also relationship with family, friends, teachers, religious leaders, whatever, any type of relationship you might have outside of the intimate relationship.
Right.
So it could be people would have trouble trusting or maintaining the healthy relationships because they just, they're traumatized. They're dealing with so much. They're socially withdrawn. They feel like they're, to blame for different things that happen to them. They're having trouble, like, sleeping, concentrating. They're always hypervigilant. So they find themselves not even going to social settings because they like, I don't know what's going to happen here. Like when you're talking about you avoid crowds, so then you find yourself not even going to like big events because you're so worried that, something bad could happen.
Yeah.
So then, this gets in the way of your life because maybe your friends are inviting you to places and you're like, no, I can't go. I'm good. Eventually they stop, inviting you, not understanding what's going on, so this affects people. Occupational challenges, you can't focus on work or like, school, productivity, you're absent a lot of the time because you just can't help it. Substance use is another one. A lot of people, when they're going through, or like if they having trouble sleeping, what are they going to do sometimes?
Yeah.
Drink. So they're too, drunk and then they fall asleep. Again, the quality of sleep matters.
Yeah.
Or they'll use drugs and they'll get addicted because then that's the only way they can, combat the thoughts that are going on in their head or like the nightmares or the flashbacks. So they find very unhealthy coping mechanisms. So again, with substance, we all know how that goes. Emotional and physical health issues, depression, anxiety, chronic pain, other stress-related disorders, it could affect people very different ways. So, and those are just some of them. Again, people react to things differently.
Yeah.
So, symptoms and effects will look differently. Another thing I think it is important to highlight, especially with the effects on both adults and children, dissociation. So dissociation, we talked about it a little bit earlier. So someone will, how do I explain this really well? Separate themselves. They will separate themselves consciously or unconsciously, separate themselves from what happened to them. Yeah. And it's a trauma response. So, and with dissociation, there's two categories. There's depersonalization and derealization.
Take us through that. Break it down for us. No, we need to understand.
Okay, so depersonalization, this is where someone feels detached, as if someone feels like they're outside of their body and they're just observing what happened to them. Like someone feels like they were like as if they were in a dream.
Yeah.
So, they're feeling a sense of unreality of the self or their body, or, they're just choosing to withdraw so that, it doesn't pain or, like by the emotion of pain that comes from what happened to them, they try to separate from. Like I said, sometimes it happens consciously or unconsciously. A lot of times it happens in cases of abuse, where children or adults, they abuse so many times that they, during the abuse, as a way to cope, they could just freeze, their body freezes, and they try to imagine a place that is safe, where they feel safe. This could be a person thinking of, let me just think of like the beach, I'm in a happy place, I'm in a happy household or something like that. This is a way of them not dealing with what is happening to them in that particular moment.
Yeah.
So then this becomes their coping mechanism for any time they get a flashback or they're in an experience that brings them, that triggers them. They find themselves going back to that happy, safe place, and it becomes the routine. So anytime they're triggered, unconsciously, it goes back. It goes straight, your body and your mind goes straight to that safe place. So that's one way they can separate the two. Then it becomes like, oh, that happened to Lorna there, but not the Lorna that is here right now, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. It is more like
tricky.
denial.
Kind of. You could say that. And by denial in the sense of like, by me denying this, I will feel safer.
Exactly. I will not feel these emotions.
Yes, exactly. And then, so that is depersonalization. And then derealization, on the other hand, is more of like where the person feels like the environment or the world around this survivor, victim, the world is unreal. It's distant, if that makes sense. So this, it is similar a little bit, but this one is, the derealization is more of like experiences of unreality of surroundings. They're just like, the world is a dream, nothing is real, everything is distant.
Yeah.
But yeah, and when we're making a diagnosis of PTSD, sometimes we have to highlight the type, specify whether someone has PTSD with dissociative symptoms or not. So a dissociative symptoms would be, I could say, someone is diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder with a depersonalization specifier, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
but that's too technical. So that is, that I wanted to highlight that, especially, with how it affects people, as children or as an adult. You could be in, like the depersonalization, the dissociation might become so rampant, or like so, what's the word? Like it becomes a part of you that you can't even help it. You're in, let's say, like a crowded place, you're having fun with your friends, and then you just like out of the blue, like you switch off. And people have to be like, hey, and you're like, oh, I had blown that for a minute. Doesn't mean that everyone who switches off, has PTSD.
Of course, we're not telling you. Yeah, if you're listening in, we are not asking you to. This is not a class. You're not taking a psychology class.
Exactly.
We're only trying to paint a picture for you. Do not go all around diagnosing yourself and diagnosing other people.
Thank you. We need to make a disclaimer at the beginning of this thing. Yeah. But this is real. It's real for a lot of people. So that's why anytime that people just throw around the PTSD, I'm like, I wish you knew how heavy this is for a lot of people, where they can't even go about their daily lives without getting triggered. Things around them trigger them. It could be the slightest thing. And sometimes, let's say when trauma has happened, childhood, sometimes the brain forgets. And I put forget in quotes because sometimes it's a way for the brain to protect the body. Again, going back to like the emotional pain, it might get too real, too much, that the brain tries to forget a few details just to protect the body. Yeah. And then let's say 20, 30 years down the road, you experience something
and
very
it just
similar.
shoots you back. Yeah.
And sometimes you're even thrown off. You're like, why am I reacting this way to this particular scenario? Forgetting that this happened to you and the memory was suppressed by the brain, just a way to protect itself. So when something happens to you 20, 30 years down the road, the body remembers what happened to you.
There's a common saying, the body never forgets.
Oh yeah, it's a book.
It's a book?
The body keeps the score.
I've not seen the book, but I've seen it a lot in a couple of writings.
Yeah, the body does remember a lot, and yeah, the book talks a lot about, PTSD and how, the body remembers things that the brain might, sometimes suppresses. So it is likely that, you'll find triggers in the environment that will just take you to a place that you probably don't even remember. Right. Or you remember and you suppress. Yeah.
I think when we jumped from the definition and jumping into the symptoms and signs of what PTSD might look like, we might have not thought about the common causes. I know when we're talking in here, we sort of touched them a bit while we were, breaking down the signs and everything. But are there common ones that people might not have an awareness or understanding of?
I think people might have these all could be common ones, I guess. Mm-hmm. Like war. Yeah. Like war.
Well, we're looking at military personnel mostly, I think.
Yeah, even those that are not like military.
Yeah.
If you think about what went on in the north, the northern Uganda for like the longest time, even the survivors.
Exactly.
Yeah, they would, a lot of PTSD, a lot of research that was done post-war, and there's a lot of PTSD. So with survivors, with the military personnel, anyone, because it doesn't have to be like you don't have to be the one fighting. You could be the one running away, and then you see your whole, so witnessing story told to you of what happened in the north. Again, you could easily get exposed or triggered that way, and you could get that diagnosis. Mm-hmm. Another thing, physical abuse. I've been throwing that around a lot. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, any type of violence, natural disasters, hurricanes,
oh my God. When you mention natural disasters, let me tell you something. I was having a conversation with a friend. That was last year. And she told me, I'll not give so many details. She must have mentioned it on live. I don't remember, but I won't give in so many details. And she mentioned that because she experienced so many landslides in her home area, she is not comfortable when the rain starts. Because I was talking to her and I was like, oh my God, it's going to rain. And then she opens up and I'm like, I had no idea that was something.
Yeah, it is something. Anything that is just traumatic, it's in its own way, that causes any type of like major disruptment. Childbirth could also be cause for PTSD, right?
Yeah. Hey.
If you had a traumatic, time delivering.
I saw some videos and I'm like, hey, Lord.
Right? Because, like, if you're having, let's say, if you're having a life or death situation when you're giving birth, like, it could easily, keep you away from hospitals. It could keep you away from, let's say, giving birth again.
Or even does it go as far as affecting someone's sexual life, especially that part?
It could, because
you're avoiding to get pregnant.
It could, because exactly. Damn. Because you know exactly where it will end.
Ouch.
Even people that, let's say, you are in, a family member or whatever, they went to a hospital and they were going through some really, like, they had a major accident and you had to be in that hospital and you were there, you were hearing the screams and the cries. And I apologize if I'm triggering anyone, because just using this word could also trigger people.
Right.
Yeah. So someone could stay away from hospitals just because they're like, I hated that experience. I do not want to be around a hospital because it reminds me of, that particular incident.
Mm-hmm.
And, for the longest time, someone avoids the hospital just because of that. So very many things in the environment could, trigger or cause PTSD. Accidents, severe accidents, plane, cars, whatever it is. And also, being a witness to any type of violence, shootings, terrorist attacks. We all know how, any type of witness, or it could be like, or violence in the home, children witnessing any type of violence in the home, so very many things. And that's just to name a few causes. So people need to be aware. Just, I think, when you witness something and you just feel like it's sticking with you for a while, and now you're avoiding, you're having all these thoughts, and yeah,
because now you're talking about, we are mostly talking about, I can mostly hear home. And when you mention the part of violence and also being a witness and all this information flying around, possibly in the newspapers, I feel like it's important for us to touch bits of the PTSD that may come with the state of affairs.
Yeah, I mean, if we're just experiencing, like, imagine, because, a video was circulating about the different shootings that are going on, like, in that, I can't remember where exactly it was, but where the policeman shot an Indian man down. Right. And imagine the people that were in that office, yes, they ran, however, they were witnesses. And for some seeing it on social media, they might now feel unsafe in a closed environment with a policeman with a gun.
Hey, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like seeing guns. Back then, I would see them. Yo, you're a police officer. Good, I am me. But right now, I'm looking over my shoulder all the time. Like, dude, I don't like that.
Exactly. I like the word that you use, looking over your shoulder.
Yeah.
And this is what happens with the hypervigilance, with people with PTSD. They're always looking over their shoulders. Of like, okay, like, is that person behind me? They're too close to me. They're getting really close. But if they're hiding something,
Because I entered a shop. I entered a shop on my building where I work. And there was this police officer. He was, I don't know what, maybe he was shopping for his kid, but he had a gun. And my first thing in the head was, why did they allow him inside? And I had to really squeeze past him. But I also wanted to look clearly. Is he holding, is it called a cork? Is he the trigger? It's called the trigger. Is he holding it? I just didn't even want to look directly, and yet I wanted to be sure I am safe. And man, I don't like right now. I don't like. I don't know. Oh, no, yeah, I don't like it.
Right, and I feel you. I feel you. Like, when you see a lot of it on social media, like, of course you're going to be hyper vigilant. Like, your body's going to pick up those messages. Yeah. Of like, this person is holding a gun. And I don't know what they're going through. They could just, start shooting.
They might see my big legs and they're like, my ex had big legs. Let me shoot them. And you're like,
exactly.
I'm not the one now.
Right. So I mean, honestly, it's a real thing. It's a real thing for a lot of people. And, I can use this story because, like, it's a personal story. Where, like, when I was in the US for, like, all those years, and we were seeing, police shootings of, black people, and every time you get stopped by a cop and you're just like, oh my God, I hope today is not the day,
Yeah.
Because a lot of black people are being shot at traffic stops. A regular traffic stop can, fatal. So you're always on alert. Like, okay, a cop stopped me. Oh my God, I hope I have everything I need. I hope they don't do this. I hope they don't do that. Right. And you're just like shaking. And sometimes you just like freeze and you're like, you can't even speak, just because you're thinking, you're like, oh my God, am I going to be the next person on the news?
Right.
So it's because, like, it could give you a lot of hypervigilance and other things that are related to.
You see, when you mentioned the part when you were in the US, I think, I don't know if I mentioned it in the video that I put up. I was like, I don't know what it's like for the people in the US, because if this is happening on I would say a minimum scale, but then it's also maximum for us right now. What is then happening for these people in the US who have access to guns? Because it's not just police officers. Just be in a mall. Exactly. It's not just police officers. Because, hey, I was on a border and one of those security guards had their gun holding it. I was like, hey, this border man should ride very fast. Because I don't know what's going to happen. Yay!
It's real, man.
I think there is a bigger conversation we need to have on the state of affairs. That is something that people do not have and do not get to, appreciate. Because most of the times we turn to memes and just laugh about it. And then wait for... and then we get ranked as the happiest country on the nation.
Yeah. And if you dug deeper, you would know that
it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, we're just trying to cope. We're honestly just trying to cope. Yeah.
I don't know if this is the point where we say we've reached the top of the hour.
Yeah, to be continued.
To be continued. Please, we're going to continue with this because it needs deeper understanding for us to not just keep throwing around the word PTSD, like Lorna mentions. But for now, if you were triggered in any way, please reach out to any professional that will be of great service. Not forgetting Kampala Counseling Services. Madame Lorna, come in here.
I've worked with a lot of clients with PTSD, and most of what we focus on is how does it manifest in their daily life? Are they having trouble sleeping or going to work? And we're equipping them with coping mechanisms of, okay, if I'm feeling triggered, how do I then calm down? If I'm getting anxiety in a big group of people, how do I calm myself down? How do I, say my affirmations and, try to remind myself that I'm not to blame for what happened to me. What happened to me is real. And how do I soothe myself? Take a walk, listen to music. How do I regulate my emotions in the event that I'm triggered by something? So again, our aim is not to trigger anyone. When we're talking about things like this, we're always shooting for awareness, letting people know that this is real for a lot of people. And there's services out there. Again, Kampala Counseling Services. Feel free to reach me at 0741 056 164, and I'll always, be here to help out if you need me.
Yeah. You need to mention the timings. You're not going to be called at 12 a.m.
Yes, hopefully I don't get clients call at 12 a.m. I'm actually very serious about my boundaries with my work number. Anything past 6 p.m. is to be dealt with tomorrow, the next business day. So if you call, and you don't get me, just leave me a message and I will for sure get back to you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for now. We shall be covering more topics under PTSD. We're going to dedicate a couple of days to it until we have at least until we feel like we have touched that one.
Yes, because it's a big topic and it's heavy. We need time, girl. We need time. But I'm always happy to create this awareness with you and everyone else. So thanks for always listening in, people.
Right.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Hashtime with Nakabuye Chiwanuka. If you loved what you heard, make sure you subscribe to Hashtime with Nakabuye Chiwanuka in your podcast platform of choice and share it with your friends, loved ones, and everyone that you believe is affected by the millennial world around us. Also, feel free to share your insights about what connected with you on social media and be sure to tag us. We are at Hashtime with Nakabuye Chiwanuka on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, our handle is at HTNK Podcast. You can also use the hashtag HTNK in session. Catch catch you next week. Remember, we have the new segment coming out every Monday, and then there is a new episode coming up on next Wednesday. Ciao.